what's up guys? My name is Lawrence Phillip, aka DJ Random, and once again we're gonna try to recreate a sound inspired by Netflix original series Stranger Things. So if you don't know Stranger Things is kind of like a pretty cool series that sets in the 80s. So they're using kind of like a 80s sound for the scoring, and they sound really good. And of course, at the same time, like 80s is kind of back in style right now. A lot of band or artists using 80s sounding sound. And of course, there is always the genre synthwave. That whole genre is like completely inspired by that era. So today, that's what we're going to try to recreate. If you're wondering what sound we're going to recreate, we're actually going to recreate a pad. And then this pad have kind of like a spacey sci-fi feel to it. So if you're wondering which one and how that sounds like, it's this one. So that's the sound that we're going to try to recreate. But as always, before we get started, I just want to say that this is inspired by, so of course we're not going to be able to create something that sounds exactly the same because we're using a digital synth, while the composer for Stranger Things probably used an actual analog synth. So we're just going to create something similar to it because, once again, the whole idea of this is just to get you guys to know how to make this kind of sound, because, at the end of the day, we want to make our own sound instead of like copying someone else, right? So, okay, so let's just get started. As always, what we do is we go with the initial preset. And then what we want to do is we want to turn on oscillator A and oscillator B. We're going to leave this the same. What we're going to do is we're going to go the unison this into 3. And then we're going to detune it a little bit. And this should be what we have right now. So that's basically just a basic saw wave, like 2 oscillator of them. One slightly detuned and the other one is not. So just 3 voice and 1 voice. And then the next thing that we want to do is we want to go to the amp envelope. And we're going to try to recreate this envelope a little bit. So we're just going to move this slightly, maybe like 50 milliseconds, 50 to 60. And then we want to make this slightly curved. Well, maybe we can go a little bit more. And then what we want to do is we want to lengthen the decay a little bit and then shorten the sustain. And then this on the curve, we want to make it like this. And then the release, we're going with maybe 1.45 or something like that. It's like something like this. Let's just hear it. So by doing this, especially that release, now already giving it kind of like a little bit of a spacey feel to it. And then now the next thing that we want to do is we're trying to recreate an analog synth. One of the main characteristics of vintage analog synth is noise. There's always white noise going on in there. So let's just turn on the noise. And then we're going to go to analog. And then we'll go with ARP white, which is basically your standard white noise. And then let's see how that sounds. So let's just put it like slightly right here. And then the next thing that we want to do when we're trying to emulate analog synth is we want to try to make the pitch of this oscillator not exactly lock in tune all the time. Because, if you understand how analog synthesizer work, analog synthesizer is actually all about controlling voltage, that's electrical current. So they're not always 100% stable. So that's why you kind of have that little bit of a fluctuating pitch, because like all this different voltage is creating a whole different pitch. So that pitch is slightly kind of like drifting in and out a little bit when you're doing analog synth. So we're going to try to recreate that. What we do is we go to LFO and then we're going to go with the, let's say we're going with the 1 bar right here or 2 bar. 2 bar is okay. And then on the mode, we're gonna go with off. The reason we want to go with off is because we don't want this like to be like consistently every time we trigger a new note, and then it's gonna start over. So we want this to be off, and it just kind of start wherever it left off. So it kind of gives it a little bit of like a random feel to it. So let's assign this to the fine tune right here. And then we want to make this really, really narrow. Maybe slightly, maybe around that much. Because the whole idea is just like, this should be barely there. It's not that noticeable because when you can hear like a pitch drifting, that means you've gone a little bit too much. So this should be really, really subtle. So let's listen to this. All right, now that we have that, the next thing that we want to do is we want to go to the filter. So let's turn on the filter, and don't forget to assign oscillator B and the noise too, right here. And then we want to go with the band pass. So let's go with the band 12 right here. And then what we want to do is, want to have a little bit of resonance. And then let's give a little bit of a drive and a little bit of a fatness right here. And then let's see how that sound like. So now that we have that, the next thing that we want to do is we want to assign this envelope right here. Just a little tiny bit. Bring this back. Let's bring this back a little bit. And then. And then we want to recreate something that's like really, really plucky, really fast. So let's go with the second envelope right here. And then we'll go with the maybe 45 millisecond maybe. And then sustain is 0. And then we want this to be right here in the cutoff. And then let's give a little bit of resonance right here. So I think now by the time we have this, what I've noticed is the release is a little bit too long, so let's reduce that. Okay, now that we have this, let's go to the LFO2, and we want to modulate these a little bit. And what we want to do is we want to create like a ramp shape. And then we want to go with envelope, I think. And we're gonna go with a bar, and let's assign this here just to see how that goes. Okay, now that we have that, let's go to the effects section. First thing we want to do is we want to put a delay in there, and then let's move this to 1/8, and then turn it into ping pong, and then let's listen to this. And then let's turn on a reverb. I want to reduce the size a little bit, and then let's give this a low cut. And then let's see how that sounds. Okay, now that we have this, the next thing that we want to do is we want to go to a filter. Because right now what we have is just like a really, really fast attack. Let's turn this off. So it's like it's really bright in the beginning, from the beginning. Well, if we listen to like the previous one, it starts very, very kind of like dull without that much of a high frequency content. So it was more kind of like a low pass going on. What we're going to do is we're going to do this. And then what we want to do is, let's go to the 12 right now. What we want to do is we want to assign a macro right here and go to here. Let's just try it like this for now. And then we want to give it a drive. Let's listen to how that sounds with this filter. So let's listen to it without. And with. Might go a little too overboard with the drive because I can hear a little bit of a distortion right there. Okay, so that sounds pretty good. And then what we want to do last is we want to put an EQ in here. And what we want to do is we want to reduce some low end frequency because that's quite bassy. And then we want to boost the high frequency a little bit. So let's just recap what we did here. So we started this with like a 2 oscillator, both using a saw wave. So one is just using 1 voice, and then the second one's using 3 voice. And then we detune this by narrowing the detune a little bit on the second oscillator. And then we actually add a noise to give it that kind of like analog vintage synth. And then the next thing that we did was adjusting the envelope. Also kind of automate the fine tuning here to give it a little bit of a pitch drift effect. And then we go to the filter where we assign all the oscillator, and then we're using band pass over there, which being modulated by envelope 1 and envelope 2. Envelope 2 was to give it more like a plug feel in the beginning. And then the envelope 1 is basically the one that did most of the work though. After that, basically all we did was go to the FX, giving it a little bit of a delay and reverb, and then EQ some of the unwanted frequency, especially the low end. And then we put the last filter, which is essentially we just automate that by assigning it to the macro. We automate that to give it kind of like a little bit of a movement to the patch. So it's not just like a static where like it's like completely full open, but we start with like a low pass that's just kind of like gradually opening up all the frequency to give it a little bit of a movement. And at the end, this is what it sounds like. So I did this a while back. Basically, this is what we have. We play it with all the other parts. So there you have it, guys. A Stranger Thing inspired pad with a sci-fi feel to it. If you guys like this, please give me a thumbs up. And if you guys find this to be really, really helpful, then please subscribe to my channel. And if you guys have any question, of course, just fire it up on the comment down below. And also, you can download this patch for free. The link will be available on the description. And thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.